Ahsoka, Balance of Truth, Book 1, Chapter 33. Sir, Bev called over. I've been receiving signals from the vicinity of Vector 1, staggered proximity, and a possible scramble relay. The signal is incoherent and reads binary at intervals. Heavy encryption, perhaps. 7? Any thoughts? Side asked. I am running algorithms now. Binary could be arbitrary or double code for heightened decryption. Let us hope it is option 1. Option 2 would take some time to decipher, the electronic voice responded. Run through your protocol, of course, 7, but work with Tagada Taya and Abalder, Side returned. Of course, Captain. That will take me offline and into the network, though. Proceed? Side thought through as many scenarios as he could muster, seeing none requiring network tactical details for the next few minutes. Proceed. Bev, is it repeating or a string of original? Side asked with his hands at his chin. It is repeating, 5-minute cycles, she replied. Half by half at 15 minutes, he thought, but then asked, the hyper relay in the system has been deactivated, yes? Affirmative, sir, she responded again. 2 more transmissions. No, 3. Okay, Bev, get me the Herald, please. Captain side? Asked a grave and deep voice over a static-laced comm. Captain Cag. Descend to atmospheric, waypoint vector 1. Hold position. Wait for orders, Side commanded. Sir. Clean up that channel, Bev. Working, sir, she responded. Side could not shake the notion that something was at work against him. He gazed around the room, focusing on a few of the faces he'd been around for years, each one diligently executing their assignments with intense concentration. Sir, we have a second signal with the same key sequence, locating origin. Bev barked out quickly, her hand pressing hard against the single earpiece she was employing. Quickly, please, Side said, fingering his chin again. He glanced at the hollow image settled in line along the front bank of consoles, directly under the center monitoring screen, watching as his game board refreshed every few seconds. Nar, Bev said finally. That was unexpected, and he began rubbing his thumbs at his temples. Erratic primary? No. Programmed erratic primary, he thought to himself. Bev, is there any pattern in the signal planetside? Is it possibly generating a pre-programmed range? He asked his comm officer. No pattern to speak of, sir. Location varies, even from the last known source, she replied. Dispersal range, he asked, trying to eliminate all possibilities. 50 km distant to 100 and all points between. So the source must be rooted out at ground level. Bev, I need the brew call. Go ahead, sir, she replied immediately after a well-practiced keystroke. Captain Maytak, coordinate with the Herald planetside. Maintain 200 to 250 km distant. I want to get a read on the signal source. On our way, Captain. The quick, heavily accented Twi'lek response came. Side considered tactical ground deployment if they could significantly reduce transmission possibilities for the primary signal planetside, but even then, his orders were clear. He looked again to the hollow image of all his assets and fleetingly thought about employing a more diverse tactical strategy by spreading his battle groups across the planet's circumference. It would hinder quick action, but would close any gaps between the hyperlane and subsidiary intrasystem thoroughfares. Maintaining free range with no terminus would eliminate twilight ghosting, perhaps even help to identify the signal sources, he thought to himself. Side, he stated, his gaze focused intently on the hollow image. Groups 2 and 5 assume pattern theta, and then watched as 6 of the small blue dots began moving toward their respective poles on Mustafar in groups of 3. Sir, could the signal be anomalous? Bev asked with a thoughtful look. Never refute a pattern, Lieutenant, but had there not been a secondary, I would have entertained the suggestion, Side answered, his eyes still focused on the hollow image. The native population has given any Imperial action on the planet an extensive birth. I don't believe there is anything anomalous about this, Pritkar added. Agreed, but also do not disregard the possibility, Side offered. Assumptions can lead to devastating consequences. Taking his eyes off the image of the deploying fleet, he focused on the small moon. Captain Ephod, bring us to the moon. I want to find the source of the signal there as well. Right away, sir, she responded over the intra-ship comm. Sir, Bev chimed in. Yes, we have a tertiary signal. Kawani had no idea what she had done, if she had done anything, or if Ahsoka had intervened at some point. Her mind was racing, her heart was pounding, and irrationality was beginning to take hold. Was this indeed what panic felt like? Ahsoka! She yelled, not being able to see over the large metal door. She vaguely remembered turning to face her friend the second before the door slammed into the wall, Ahsoka lying prone and in its direct path. Positioned as she, Kawani, was now, Ahsoka was either on the other side of the door or under it more fatally. She then remembered the sounds that had filled the room and the undoubted smashing of bones she knew she had heard. With trepidation, she reached up to pull herself over the door to inspect Ahsoka's fate. Swapping the hilt to her right hand, the purple blade illuminated the area in a menacing glow, casting twilight in ways the white blade had not. Every surface seemed to be drawn to it, and with that cast elongated shadows that appeared to create viable threats that weren't there. She pulled herself over, looked down on the other side, and let all the breath she had been holding in her lungs out with an enormous exhale, redirecting cascades of dust and talus. Oh, thank the stars, she thought as she dropped down on the other side at Ahsoka's side. Ouch, she screamed, falling forward as her right knee gave out from under her. She fired out her left hand to reduce her impact, but was redirected awkwardly by the cable at her right wrist. She tossed the saber back to her left hand and deftly severed the cable. She did her best to ignore the pain and focused on Ahsoka, assessing her as best as possible. Her eyes were quickly directed to the source of the bone crunching as Ahsoka's mantra had taken the full force of the impact. Kawani stared quickly at the severed cable dangling in front of her face, suddenly struck by the effects of what had occurred. Your antlers! Stop yelling, Ahsoka said through pursed lips, her eyes shut fast. My head is killing me. At least you still have it, Kawani responded in a lighter voice. What happened? Ahsoka managed with a strangled cough. How bad is it? Your horn things are, well, broken, Kawani said, not seeing any sense in glazing the truth. Ahsoka did not respond immediately. She only blew out short breaths. Reaching down absently, she grabbed at the air a few times before finding her pocket and pulling out a loose cloth. Here, she said, handing it to Kawani. She carefully took the cloth from Ahsoka and stared at it. She canted her brow and then stared at Ahsoka. What, cover. The hollows. Keep dust out, Ahsoka managed between breaths. Kawani slid her arm under Ahsoka's head and propped it up slowly. Tell me if I'm hurting anything, she almost whispered. Only my pride, Ahsoka responded slowly, the vague outlines of a smile pulling at the corners of her mouth. Kawani resting her head on her good knee. She focused on the broken Montreal and inspected the area with the slow wave of the saber hilt. Fibrous veins spanned the inner reaches of the hollows, crisscrossing one another repeatedly, forming a web. The broken edges secreted a sticky white paste that oozed from the marrow. She was both mystified and horrified. She could not help but look at it, even though her stomach urged her to do anything else. She covered both bases of the sheared Montreal with the cloth, understanding what Ahsoka had meant. The white secretion was a healing agent, and a quick one at that. A moderate but sudden tremor vibrated the room. There remains a danger, Ani, Ahsoka whispered. We must leave here. She finished and managed to sit upright, albeit groggily. No need to tell me twice. Can you stand? She asked, her attention drawn to her right knee and its increasing warmth. She absently rubbed it gently, feeling the kneecap slide slightly under even moderate pressure. Kawani looked back at Ahsoka, who had opened her eyes and was staring at her knee. Can you? Ahsoka asked. I don't know, but we need to regardless, she responded, casting her view toward the top of the room and assessing their next task. We can climb out using the consoles on that wall, she said, pointing to her left. She looked back at Ahsoka's head and grimaced. Tearing a small cloth patch from her sleeve, she balled it and began dabbing at her head, wiping away bits of stone and debris. I hope the info we pulled is useful. Oh, you did get it then. Ahsoka managed to push herself up to her feet. She stumbled awkwardly, swaying where she stood. Kawani reached out to brace her friend and then pushed off the floor to stand herself up. I got everything there was time for, she said with a wince, her knee buckling badly. Ahsoka braced herself with her right hand and slowly bent down to retrieve her saber, only then looking at the source of the illumination in the room. How did you get that? She asked, pointing to the purple blade. I have no idea, Kawani answered. Everything happened so fast, she added, staring at the saber. Ahsoka pondered it for a few seconds, then shrugged, staring at the console banks they would use as a ladder. Are you up for it? She said, nodding at the doorless entry. Kawani rubbed her knee a final time. Pain be damned, she said, reaching her first handhold and pulling herself up. Ahsoka followed right behind her. As unbearable as it was, they reached the hallway in short order. I'm going to be feeling this tomorrow, Kawani commented. Ahsoka let a slight giggle escape her lips, then winced immediately as the action sent severe pain sparking through her skull. Tomorrow is a good thing, Ani. Kawani couldn't deny the logic and found herself nodding in agreement as she reached a hand down to pull Ahsoka up and through the doorway into the hallway. They both lay on the floor briefly, basking in its evenness. Where the hell is Czar? She thought absently. Tending to our knee presently. Take care while walking on it, please, he responded. Are my thoughts ever my own anymore? I do not know, Kawani. I have never remained on this plane this long, he spoke. It was rhetorical. I know. All Kawani could do was shake her head, although immaculately grateful for whatever Tsar was doing as the knee was feeling better already. They rolled over to get up, wincing from aches and pains. On their feet, they began walking back down the way they had come, arms around each other's shoulder for support. Ahsoka, Kawani asked, slowly sliding across the floor. Where to now? And I suppose how, and with what? Ahsoka blew out a breath. I haven't gotten that far yet. Kawani didn't say anything, but continued shuffling down the hallway at Ahsoka's side, offering as much support as she was getting in return for the shared assist. I am working on an exit plan. Well, R3 is more to the point, but it will take some time. Assuming we are allowed to land, we can also assume we will not be allowed to leave. Ahsoka understood the logic and could not argue against it. That Kawani had already begun an exit strategy was not surprising. The Mirialan was crafty, but admittedly, she, Ahsoka, had not thought this entire objective through to completion, and had allowed fate its window of opportunity. They had attained information, but to what degree neither knew. It would take some time to analyze correctly. Abora, she thought to herself, trying in vain to link the word to anything she knew, coming up with a blank. It was either significant or nothing but a file header. Ahsoka, Kawani had stopped. Ahsoka turned her head to respond, but turned her entire body to face the Mirialan. What? She said absently. Do your horns affect your hearing? I've called you 3 times, Kawani said, standing in the middle of the hall, leaning heavily on her left leg. No, spatial perception. I'm sorry, just in thought, Ahsoka responded truthfully. Kawani shrugged and shuffled to Ahsoka's side again. Eyeing the wounded Montreal, she said, Will they heal? Ahsoka absently ran a hand up her leku toward the crown of her skull. Yes, over time they will grow back. Until then, there will be fits of disorientation, though. What were you saying? Kawani, shifting gears on cue, pointed at her wrist comm. I have been scrambling a signal to R3, which he's using as a focal point to arrange an RF map. With that, at least we can decide what to do because I know there is something out there, she said with a gentle wave of her hand over her head. I just pray it isn't one of those aggressors we encountered in hut space. Ahsoka looked at her friend and could not help but feel somewhat more relaxed and at peace. The woman had inserted herself right into this plan, and then had summarily cut off any excuse that could be arranged or argued to deny her. It felt good, she admitted inwardly, to feel that peaceful warmth again. It felt good to trust someone again. I can't argue that, Ani. Although that ship was more a liability to its cause than any gains it may bring, probably a good reason we haven't encountered them before. How long will it take R3, do you think? Kawani considered it, wincing her eyes in strategic thought. Another 20 hours, roughly, refocusing her gaze on Ahsoka. I say we make it to the opening we made and hold tight for a bit. Ahsoka nodded in agreement, having nothing better to add, but then the thought struck her. If R3 is out there, why doesn't he just get us out of here? It seemed like common sense. Because there are already 3 marks that he's aware of, no specs or IDs, Kawani responded. Ahsoka understood, then nodded. Better to know what we're up against. Kawani's wrist vibrated as if on cue, and she looked down. Make that 4 marks, and the hyper relay in the system is offline. Ahsoka was transfixed on the latter. Offline meant deliberately. 4 marks was a prelude for more, she knew. Inform him to stay discreet, Ani. They are forming a blockade. She considered the implications. They mean to keep us here. She looked at Kawani and inwardly sighed with a sudden shock of grief. They meant to keep me here, she corrected herself. Ahsoka. The whispered voice again, strong, close, she thought. The registered familiarity rang true yet again. It was the same source she had known before. Something is, or someone is rather, trying to reach out to Ahsoka, Zar said to Kawani as if agitated. And what's wrong with you? Kawani thought, placing more importance on the tone rather than the message. And who? Was her next question. It takes a great deal of concentration to heal, and I have no idea, only that the source is on the planet side, he responded. Who is that, Ahsoka? Kawani asked bluntly. Ahsoka spun her head to face Kawani with a quizzical look. Zar picked up on something. Ahsoka stared blankly into Kawani's eyes, comprehending the abilities of the spirit's form. I know the voice, but I can't place it. It is elusive. Given their location and perceived predicament, Kawani contorted her face to assume Ahsoka should understand the obvious. Vader? She stated. No, not Vader, Ahsoka said immediately. He isn't in this system, I assure you. No, the voice is female regardless. Tell her, Kawani, Zar almost reprimanded. Fine, she thought in return. Ahsoka, what is a Shatterpoint? Ahsoka stopped walking altogether. What? She asked, a little more forcefully than intended. Kawani could see the renewed tension in her friend, the force picking up momentum as its currents redirected toward the Togruta. She also saw the tears forming in the corners of her eyes. It took some time to piece together, but since, well, she pointed the ignited saber in her posing hand. Since this happened, she continued, that word has been etched in my mind. She finished, trying not to sound crazy. I see how you're reacting and assume it has significance. Thank you. Now I can focus more directly, Zar said, almost exasperated, but Kawani ignored the comment. Ahsoka had not expected something so distant in her memories, or more off-topic from their present situation, to materialize in a conversation. I'm sorry, she started. It was just very unexpected. Every Jedi had, she corrected, an opportunity to specialize in a particular ability if they so choose. That ability was the style mark of the owner of the hilt you hold. She paused, not realizing how painful memories can be at times. I never saw him employ it. I just heard the stories, mind you, so I have no true grasp of what it entails. But I can say it helped him ascend to the rank of Grand Master. Kawani looked at the hilt and ignited the saber in her hand for a long moment, trying to comprehend its current significance, if any, but more importantly, how it provided her with the question she had longed to ask, albeit strategically. Do lightsabers carry power in and of themselves? The question was expected this time, and the memories of death and the unknown fate of so many dissipated into those of fondness and of the deep emotional bond she had formed with her related questions. Master Terra Sinube, she thought fondly, understanding how much she had learned from the aged Jedi Master in their brief time together years earlier. Or that of Ilum and the centuries-old Hu Yang, who assisted in every traditional lightsaber build she knew of, including the one currently in Kawani's possession. The easy answer is yes, that anything can possess a power given its creation was through intent. She felt those answers aligned with her thoughts, as they had always come easily. Does that particular saber? She thought carefully. I do not know, but that is your journey to embark on, Ani. Kawani switched focus from the saber hilt and illuminated blade to Ahsoka. What do you mean, my journey? Ahsoka smiled slightly. In your moment of need, it answered your call, whether you willed it to or not. She paused briefly and closed her eyes for a few seconds. Opening them slowly, she said, I believe your question has been answered, she finished with a wink. Kawani was unsure how to respond, or even what the implications, if any, meant. She looked up and down the blade and listened to the nascent hum of the focused energy, waving it involuntarily and gesturing to hand it to Ahsoka. No, Ani, you were meant to have it. No, it's yours now, Ahsoka said with considerably deep sincerity. Kawani knew the answer before Ahsoka had said anything, but wanted to assume nothing. However, hearing the words brought a feeling of awe as she spun it before her a few times, listening to the audible report of each pass. Whether or not there was a source of inert power within seemed almost trivial to the reality of wielding it. The joy of being in control of something so implausibly beautiful yet so lethal by design. It did call to me, answered me, she thought. So did the vambrace, Zara interjected. Don't ruin the moment, she thought in return. Kawani stopped herself as her intended question lay on her tongue, but unspoken as her mind was still processing the realities of what Ahsoka had already said. Just up ahead, I see the entryway, Ahsoka said. Saw the red glow illuminating the entrance they had cut into the passageway from the planet's primary light source, which caused her to pause momentarily. The rock faces embraced the color as if pulling it within. She cast a wary glance at Ahsoka, then blew out her breath as she deactivated the saber. Ahsoka, she began. Balance, Ahsoka said, surprising Kawani. I don't know why you waited so long to ask. I wasn't sure how, to be honest. I know you're neither I know you were neither a disciple of the dark side nor a proponent of the light. Kawani was still unsure how to proceed with the question. Exactly, Ani, Ahsoka responded, the two still shuffling their way to the entrance. There are many paths this conversation could take, and I am more than willing to entertain them all in due course. But that is the heart of all of it all. She had prepared this argument since she had created the saber. There are many ways to affect the color of the blade itself. The Sith bleed theirs, a sinful act of disrespect to the crystal within, intended to control the Force and the crystal itself to their own, to dominate. The hue of a certain color doesn't seem to have much meaning, although this one, she patted her hip, and the black hilt attached there, exhibits qualities I've never encountered before. Perhaps because it was ignited and used outside the mortal realm, Tsar said sarcastically. Kawani ignored it and remained quiet, ushering Ahsoka to continue. I needed something to channel my anger and rage into. Not that I would have assumed the role of a crazed lunatic if I hadn't, but as a means for me to direct those emotions towards something useful. Kawani was beginning to understand as the two seemed to have shared some sense of personality on many distinct levels. Ahsoka continued, It isn't a feeling or emotion that is inherently bad. It is the choice of action based upon them that defines us. To ignore them, no matter the implication of good or bad, is a means to remove ourselves from the ordinary, adopting a hubris which ultimately leads to downfall. She felt as though she were on the steps of the Jedi Temple all over again, saying the same thing to Anakin, albeit phrased differently. In essence, if we deny what we're capable of, we have no measure to understand where we've come from or where we're going. She felt absently for the saber hilt at her side again, and I stopped caring long ago about what anyone else thinks. I know who I am, and so does the Force. Kawani did understand what Ahsoka was saying, but was still somewhat confused over her last statement. Then why red, or crimson, or whatever? Why not amber, or yellow, for example? The color is meant for me. With the intent channeled into it, I want to see it residing at my side, knowing that I embrace those parts of myself willingly and use them with the same conviction as my other saber, Ahsoka said without hesitation. If anyone thinks for an instant that I've let the tendrils of the dark side take their hold on my soul, then let that be their mistake alone. I choose not to be labeled in any event. Kawani was convinced that was the most obscure answer she could have received, but she had to agree to most of it philosophically. Hearing Ahsoka talk this way invoked a more profound respect for her friend. If most of the galaxy thought this way, there would be fewer conflicts for sure, she thought. However, this did not explain Dagobah, or more to the point, nullified her sense of reason for being there in the first place. Does Master Yoda share those convictions? Kawani asked. Ahsoka pondered the question. He does now, yes. In the past, she trailed off briefly. I believe he was conflicted about the implications, she finished. He has endured a great sorrow, Ani, for many decades. He had inner conflicts, as did other council members who had already fallen victim to the hubris I mentioned. Ahsoka turned her head toward the ground before continuing. We had shared in the desolation and despair feeling alone truly bestowed. Without words, we saw each other in that light, Ani, and understanding was shared. Ahsoka finished and turned her gaze back to Kawani, who was patiently waiting for her friend to continue. The question I needed answered was a way to control what I had invited in. She paused again, flushing out the grief she still clung to. I do not want to repeat Narshada ever again. I have accepted that I am just as capable of inflicting death and destruction as I am at distributing peace, and those answers were here all along. She finished, placing a hand over her heart. Kawani nodded in understanding, then added, You and Master Yoda do not hold the patent on despair, Ahsoka. This is the Emperor's way, and why we are fighting back. Sometimes, truly, there is no other way. Ahsoka felt conflicted between discouragement and hope, knowing Kawani was right. They came to the entryway and looked out upon the blasted rock formations and fiery lava flows, but both sets of eyes were drawn to the massive Star Destroyer hovering too close for coincidence. Ahsoka turned to Kawani at her side. Ani, did you say antlers? Please consider a like and sub. It is YouTube's way of getting these to more people. I am less concerned with subs as I am with getting the story out there, and I need your help to do that. Thank you.